tēnā koutou katoa. Tukuna te wairua ki riri ki te taumata. Ko te matatika mo te pono. Hei aurahi, ina mahi. Ka auratahi te tira kia iki panuku, kia iki tangaroa. Homi e, hui e, tai ki e. Welcome everybody, thanks for coming today to the Three Waters Infrastructure Committee final meeting of the calendar year. Apologies we have today. Any apologies for absence? But she's here. Oh, right. It would be interesting to see her when she's early.
Sam online.
Yeah. So we've got no apologies for absence.
And Anita and
so we've got Sam, apology for leaving early possibly, James possibly, and Andrew possibly. And we have, so I'll move those apologies. Those in favour say aye. Oh, seconded, Sarah. All those in favour say aye. Aye, opposed, that's carried. And welcome Leanne by Zoom and Catherine by Zoom. So if people around the room, I know David's going to keep an eye out, could just let me know if either Leanne or Catherine's got their hand up and I miss it, because it would be helpful. Okay, so please be vigilant about declaring any items of interest that you have, any conflicts. Move to the previous minutes. Do I have a mover for the confirmation of the minutes? Mike, seconded by Phil. All those in favour say aye. Oh, sorry, Yanni.
Just where it was asked for in terms of the submissions to be read out, the motion was to suspend standing orders so that could happen, but I just noted that wasn't how it was recorded. I mean, I'm happy for it just to be recorded as it is, but I just thought I'd just check whether factually we need to make that correction. Thank you.
No, you didn't need to suspend standing orders to do that, so we didn't.
Yeah, thanks, Yanni. Okay, so all those in favour say aye. Aye, opposed, that's carried. There's no public forum, but this afternoon we have a deputation from Mark Christensen, the Chair of the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust. And there should be a presentation on the hub there. So welcome, Mark. And you have brought us...
Marie Burnett is the General Manager of the Trust.
And Marie, welcome. Thank you.
Press this button.
Can you put your microphone on to push the button? Yeah,
Kia ora tātou. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and season's greetings. What we like to do is just very briefly take you through some of the work that the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust has been doing. We're speaking to item 7, but also relevant is item 8 around the biodiversity fund, and item 9, the stormwater management plans. BPCT was formed in 2001. It's a landowner and community-driven organisation, and we work with those wanting to work with us, landowners, agencies, sponsors, and the wider community across both the Banks Peninsula and the Port Hills. And we're operating as a conservation community hub. At the end of the day, we think conservation is about people. So when we're talking about the Ecological Vision, some of the work that we do with carpenting, pest-free Banks Peninsula collaboration, the new project called Te Kākahu Kahukura, and then a little bit about the funding that the Trust enjoys with the Council.
So, the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust launched the 2050 Ecological Vision for Banks Peninsula at the end of 2016. The vision is a way to inspire people to be passionate about the environment around them, to understand it, their relationship with it, and take action to protect and restore it. While biodiversity protection and enhancement is the primary driver of this work, a community-wide effort to realise the vision will contribute to a prosperous, connected, resilient and healthy community. The ecological vision can't be delivered by one organisation or group on its own. It requires a collaborative and collective approach between agencies, runanga, other organisations and the community. This slide in front of you shows some of the diverse range of organisations that are already actively working towards realising this vision. To pursue our vision, we have adopted 8 ecological goals. They were adopted by the BPCT trustees on advice from a group of ecologists that was led by Professor David Norton from the University of Canterbury, and following wide consultation with our community and the organisations that we work with. The first 2 goals relate to the legal protection and careful management of high value ecological sites on the peninsula, specifically old growth forest remnants and rare ecosystems. The Trust's Conservation Covenanting Program is one of the ways that we're delivering on these 2 goals. BPCT is the only local organisation in New Zealand with the power to covenant private land in perpetuity, and we receive really great support from local landowners who wish to legally protect high biodiversity on their land in this way. So this map shows you the extent of our conservation covenants as at the end of this financial year. The black line is the Banks Ecological Region, which is the area we work across. You can see that it extends around the perimeter of the peninsula, but also to the foot of the Port Hills, and includes Cashmere. So covenanting is a voluntary and really powerful legal mechanism that ensures biodiversity is protected in perpetuity for future generations. Some of the important habitat types that have been protected through our conservation program include the remnant and regenerating forests, rocky outcrops, rare and coastal foreshore, salt marsh and peat bog ecosystems. Our conservation covenants range from a hectare in size to over 330, and really importantly, they act as ecological stepping stones and or ecological corridors where they're proximal to conservation land held by agencies and other organisations. We have 76 legally registered covenants as at 31 March, protecting over 1,500 hectares of high value biodiversity, and an additional 16 covenanting projects that are currently in process. And I guess a good problem to have is that we have an awful lot of landowner demand for our support and expressions of interest, so much so that we can't actually service all the requests we get to support them in our program. The Trust's Covenanting Program provides an ideal vehicle for landowners to protect sites of ecological service, sites of ecological significance identified by Council. This table shows 12 covenant programs that are either very recent or in progress that have been supported through the Christchurch Biodiversity Fund, because these covenants align with your ECS program. They will be co-funded by other organisations, often ECAN. There will be contributions from landowners, and also the Trust's commercial supporters provide pro bono services in terms of legal work, ecological surveys and land surveys. While the upfront costs of establishing a covenant are not insignificant, the far more onerous ongoing costs of ecological management of the conservation work being protected there are met by landowners and all future landowners as a result of that perpetual legal agreement. So this means that covenanting provides really good value, or bang for buck, for every conservation dollar that's spent. When a covenant is established with the Trust, we develop an ecological management plan that gives landowners guidance on how to manage and protect and enhance the conservation values they're protecting, and the Trust provides ongoing support to do this.
Okay, so I'd like to actually skip through a couple of these other the goals, although I refer you to Goal 4, which is around having at least 4 core areas of Indigenous forest being protected. And this leads to what is a new project, a new collaborative project, which is called Te Kakahu Kahukura. It was originally identified to be around the area of the fires in 2017 on the Port Hills. And since that time, we've been working with a collaborative group of organisations and landowners about bringing back at least 1,000 hectares of Indigenous podocarp forests on the hills. And it's focused around those areas that are on the map there, which are council reserves, they're covenanted areas either with the QE2 or with the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust. And the idea is that They would form the core of the revegetated area, and then landowners around that area would contribute by planting and pest control and so forth. We were gifted the name Te Kākahu Kahukura by Ngāti Wheki and Te Tamutu, and it's got a rich cultural narrative, which is, if you had the time, it would be very interesting to explore. A number of objectives is to bring back the birds. So we want to bring back the tui, the weka, maybe the orange-fronted kakariki, so that the birds are flourishing on the Port Hills, so they can flow down across into the Heathcote catchment, and then eventually maybe into the red zone and beyond. We want to eradicate animal pests within the area as part of the pest-free initiative, working with the Healthy Harbour program for Whakaroa Littleton, and also supporting Christchurch City Council's goals around being carbon neutral. So we've got some ideas about how the city might be able to do some offsetting or some insetting in places that you can actually see the trees growing. And of course we need to make sure that we're spending time and effort and money in ways which are having impact, so that's part of the objectives. We're going to be launching the project in April 2021, and we'd love to have the council very much as part of that launch. I come to the Banks Peninsula being pest-free effectively by 2050. I'll just briefly tell you about that.
So Pest-Free Banks Peninsula is a collaborative program. It's about the widespread eradication of animal pests so that Indigenous biodiversity can thrive across the peninsula, but importantly also into Christchurch City and the Canterbury Plains beyond. It is a community-led initiative, has been formalised through an MOU signed by 14 foundation partners, and the City Council was one of these. To date, we have been successful securing a funding offer of 5.11 million from Predator Free 2050 Limited for the next 5 years. To realise this funding, we need to be able to match it with co-contributions to the same level from our other partners. ECAN and DOC have made significant contributions towards this already. And that funding program will support 15 new full-time jobs over the next 5 years. As you can imagine, the removal of animal pests across 110,000 plus hectares of Banks Peninsula is a aspirational and very ambitious program. The project management group that's been established to deliver Pest-Free Banks Peninsula have identified some detailed strategic outcomes for the first 5 years of this program, and those are listed above. There's peninsula-wide eradication of feral goats, 2 sister eradication programs which you can see on the image there in green. One is 5,000 hectares on Kaishariti, and the other is a 23,000 hectare area in the southeastern corner of the peninsula. Those are the 2 areas that the government funding I just mentioned applies to. And in addition to that, we have some goals around increased suppression of pests in the Te Kākahu Kahukura area that Mark just referred to, and also 4,000 plus households actively involved in household trapping in a community program through the Eastern Port Hills and in the Littleton Harbour Basin.
So can I just conclude by referring briefly to the funding. Come to the money, of course. The funding MOU that we have with the City Council has been a 10-year funding. That expires this coming year, and you'll hear from us again on the LTP submissions. But it is critical for the Conservation Trust's ability to deliver some of the council's biodiversity outcomes, but also to engage with the community. So what we're looking to continue that support. We're looking for the council to continue that support, and we're looking to that support will assist the council working with a number of other organisations around the Ecological Vision. It will enable additional covenanting to occur. It will strengthen the pest-free initiative, but also champion this new project, which we consider to be the potential for very much a city legacy project of Te Kakakura. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I think we've used up all our time talking, but thank you very much.
Oh, thank you both very much for coming in. That was actually really interesting and really important to see the incredible work that's happening from the Trust. We are out of time, but has anybody got any burning questions that they want to ask? My question is probably of staff, of whether we've got any plans to continue the funding for the MOU, so we might put that through. Thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go forward, keep up the good, awesome work. Did you? Have you still got it? Yes. Okay, or I'll allow it.
Hey, and apologies, Mark and
Marie.
And Marie. Yeah.
for if you've already said it, mentioned it. But what were the two locally extinct species that have been reintroduced?
Well, the first is tui. So, and we're still talking about what the second one should be. So the idea of the goal was to introduce two. We've had the tui. Now it'll be at least two, but we haven't decided because I think that's very much a decision which will be led by the Runanga.
Okay, regarding tui, I must say that in the last 10 years since the earthquake, I've seen tui reasonably regularly on Heberden Ave in Sumner. There's some native planting there, and also near the Travis wetlands too.
Great, they are starting to come back.
Okay, thanks. Good luck.
It's great. Beautiful bird. Thank you again. Okay, so now we come to the next item, which is the... there's no petitions today. Item 7, the Zone Committee Quarterly Update Reports. So the first one we have today is the Banks Peninsula Water Management Committee. And is it Gina?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
Gina Weibel,
Welcome,
Deputy
Gina.
Chair.
Thank you.
So just going through, the Banks Peninsula Zone Committee are pleased to have been able to provide early input into the LTP. Our top priorities are the implementation of the Whakaora Healthy Harbour Catchment Plan, with an emphasis on erosion and sediment control, particularly roadside cuttings. Risk assessment for adaptation to climate change and community engagement, as well as funding for early adaptation work such as stormwater, drainage and roading networks, so they're more resilient to avoid slips and sediment loss during storm events, as well as new rules around new builds to collect rainwater and grey water. We've also suggested staff time be funded to advise landowners to better manage septic tanks and other on-site wastewater systems on the peninsula. Continued funding for fish barrier removal to promote Mahingakai recovery. Biodiversity funding, including a bigger picture projects for biodiversity and incorporating biodiversity in operations and maintenance. And lastly, to increase cultural competence within City Council. A few other items of note from recent meetings are we support the Rod Donald Trust to purchase land covering the upper slopes of Mount Herbert and Mount Bradley to create a conservation park that would border Orton Bradley Park. We've agreed that our role in the Council's climate change risk assessment will be to advise on local knowledge of freshwater risks on Banks Peninsula. Going forward, the committee are trialling an approach that will focus our resources on 3 catchments for a set period of time, rather than our current approach, which is a bit more scattergun, attempting to cover the whole peninsula. So that will include our immediate steps funding as well as staff time and resources. And lastly, at our September meeting in Wainui, the findings of the study on septic systems found fecal contamination in the lower catchment, but only a minor contribution from human sources. The majority was from birds and stock, but noting that the human component may have been greater had it been wetter over the study period. Interviews with residents found that many on-site wastewater systems were old and that uncertainty over council plans to reticulate wastewater in the area is making residents reluctant to invest in upgrades to their systems. That's all I have.
Right, thank you. So that's interesting, isn't it? So what would help people over there if perhaps they had a timeline of what the council's plan is now that we have a decision made for?
Yeah, that's
Whakaroa.
what we recommended, just to have a little bit more clarity around timeframes.
Right.
As well as potentially some staff time to advise people on how best to manage their systems jointly with ECAN.
Okay. So I wonder if we could put that as a note at the end of the recommendation. Because the zone committees have made some recommendations on the LTP, but we just need to note them. We can't make a decision on them. Are there any questions for Gina? Not today? Hey, thank you very much for coming in and thanks for the continued good work.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so next up we have Selwyn Waihora. And it's Maria. Welcome, Maria Goodman.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. I'm here on behalf of the Selwyn Waihora Zone Committee. I'm the facilitator, and the committee send their apologies that none of them were able to make it today. I'd just like to start off by thanking, on behalf of the Zone Committee, thanking Councillor Anne Galloway for all her support and contribution this year. We know it's been quite hard for you to get to the meetings, and we've tried to get around that, but the times that you have been there, the committee has really valued your wise and collaborative support for what the committee are doing. So we really appreciate that, and we note and record that through the process, the review process, we're aiming for an alternate possibility. So we'll work with you on that next year. But it's been great.
Thank you for that. We can note that in the minutes too.
And in relation to that CWMS review work, we'd like to thank you for clearly articulating your City Council priorities to go into the letter of shared priorities that the Selwyn Waihora and the other two zone committees will receive from you. And we'd like to seek your advice and staff advice and support on how to turn those priorities into the zone committee's practical action plan. The Selwyn Waihora Zone Committee does a lot of work with Selwyn District Council, and we've probably done less with the Christchurch City Council, but we note some quite specific items in those priorities relating to sediment and erosion control. So we'd love some support on where are those spots in the Selwyn Waihora Zone and what can we do to start progressing anything that needs action. This year's been a funny year for all the zone committees, I'm sure, but the Selwyn Waihora Zone Committee, with strong support and encouragement from Councillor Anne Galloway and others, have focused on engaging with the community and quite a few specific groups and youth councils to seek ideas and test their ideas to go into the practical action plan that we're going to write for the next 3 years. So that's been really good. The committee was sad to farewell Ron Pallow and Alan Lim, who have both been there on the committee for 7 years, and so with the refreshed membership next year we'll be looking to replace those two. In particular have got that rural perspective that they have brought to the committee, and it's been really appreciated. The Zone Committee will have some sessions early next year on developing their action plan, but I thought it would be good to just let you know that so far their 5 priorities are: 1, a healthy Waikirikiri Selwyn River, and so that will be quite a key priority there. They're still wanting to keep the momentum on catchment nutrient loads, which is a big job for Selwyn Waihora Zone. Enhanced biodiversity, working with the co-governors on a healthy Te Waihora, and we know that we see the co-governors and your city council at that table too, so we're hoping to strengthen some of those relationships for the zone committee there next year. And we're also undertaking to raise awareness for those on private drinking water supplies, be it wells or other tank water. So we'll be working with initially with ECAN to help develop some collateral, and we'd like to share that with the other zone committees as well, if that's useful. So that's the plan for next year. And just one other thing to note was the committee ended the year really with a workshop to celebrate riparian planting and protection and enhancement. And I think that was a really good example of the new role that we've got coming for these zone committees. Some of the committees have been doing that anyway, but really just celebrating, being a group that can host a meeting and celebrate all the people that are doing good work and encouraging them. And it was a really positive end to the year. So we're hoping that all three of these central zone committees can really work some magic there in the next few years. And I will finish by saying we really like the system that you have of the zone committee coming to do a quarterly presentation too, and we really thank you for listening and having that ability to make some specific recommendations. And we like it so much that we've asked, and it's been agreed that we can do the same with Selwyn District Council next year, which we haven't done to date. So you're setting the way there. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for the positive words there, because it's important that we all share the information, so there's no double ups, and we all work together to actually, increase the power of that input. So I think those words were really helpful to us. Thank you. Just a question, do you work with the Central Plains Trust at all?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah. So we hosted a meeting this year actually where Central Plains were one of the key speakers, and that seemed to have a really big turnout from the community to come and hear, well, how are they going with their consents and how's that all working? And we've recently had some specific engagement with Forest and Bird who weren't at that meeting, but have also, we know that there's lots of community groups and NGOs that want to know how CPW is going, and so we've put that into our draft action plan to keep hosting those kind of meetings that helps to share that information.
Yeah, and the Trust also has a focus on the education from the Central Plains Limited. They need to put some resourcing in there as well, so there might be an opportunity there for the committee to help community groups access that, perhaps.
Yes, they've specifically asked the zone committee for help with that.
Great. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Hey, thank you very much for coming in. We'll see you next time.
Yes.
And last but certainly not least, Kevin Brown for the Christchurch West Melton Zone Committee. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks a lot. Tēnā koutoa e tēnei here. Two things for a start. First of all, the Zone Committee was very sad to see the passing of Evan Smith since the last report to the Council. Evan often presented to the Zone Committee in his continuing advocacy for the Red Zone to be restored as a multi-purpose park that promotes enhanced biodiversity, restoration of Mahingakai, and to create an amenity for both locals and visitors. He was, you may not know, an ad hoc member of the Zone Committee Recreation Working Group, so we miss him dearly. Secondly, the Zone Committee thanks the Council for joining with ECAN to write to the ministers and the new government about urban stream contamination. The principle to have a fence at the top of the cliff rather than ambulance at the bottom of the cliff has long been an ideal of the Zone Committee, and these sort of changes that need to happen will require a national imperative to change the factors that lead to these urban stream syndromes like galvanised roofs and car brake pads and things like that. So the Zone Committee had a series of 3 workshops to put together the 3 top priority areas for suggested resourcing through the Council's long-term plan. There was a lot of discussion, as there are many areas that could benefit from more resources, of course, but a consistent theme was the quality of the urban streams and rivers in Christchurch City, and this is our first priority area. In your minutes, there's some focus areas such as sediment and erosion control, and we second that where it seems to pop up, for the Opawaho and Heathcote. Sustainable urban drainage systems for stormwater. Support for Mahingakai projects, particularly normally if water is fit for Mahingakai, then it's normally of good quality. Management of weed pests, management of remaining wetlands. Remembering that large portion of what is now Christchurch City was once wetland. And in alignment with Avon River Green Corridor and other projects, so to keep these aligned. And also we had to sneak in the perennial problem of the management of groundwater use and the conservation for the city that has the highest water use in all of New Zealand. The second priority was the preservation of and improved outcomes for dryland areas and their ecosystem. In the public eye, dryland biodiversity is the poor cousin when it's compared to wetlands, streams and things like that. However, the Zone Committee has been funding through immediate steps the preservation of dryland areas, and the hope is to eventually have a dryland park. For instance, on the way to Maclean's Island, there are remnant kowhai trees that are greater than 100 years old and in the middle of pasture and grasslands, and we're providing some immediate steps, money to try and fence these off to try and recover them. Since 2015, we've spent just under $100,000 on dryland ecosystems in Maclean's grasslands, Intake Road, and we've made an initial start on making a grasslands park by installing rabbit-proof fencing and some supplementary planting. So our third priority for resourcing in the long-term plan is really to support the first two by engaging with the public. Suggested focus areas could be your ongoing support for the Community Water Partnership, engagement with community groups collecting data, sharing of data, and this is a biggie, sharing of data between the City Council, ECAN, perhaps some of the consultants, and making a large database which is online. Regular education campaigns that can lead to behaviour change. The Zone Committee tries to do some of this education stuff, but 6 community members for a population of 350,000 are not good odds. We have a presence at city functions like Meet in the Middle, World Rivers Day, Mother of All Cleanups, but in many instances it feels like we're preaching to the choir. We hope to have a stormwater superhero resource available early next year, which will also help with education, but it's the people we don't reach that we really need to talk to. The Christchurch West Melton Zone Committee is different to other zone committees in rural areas where there's more of a sense of community and everybody seems to know everybody else. Christchurch is not like that, and there is a much greater problem trying to contact and keep in touch with all of these people. So the Zone Committee has had a working group for Cashmere Stream and Port Hills for all of this year. This group has been very active during the year and recently presented to the ECAN Council together with other community groups, and these presentations were very well received. A highlight for this year includes the recent completion of stage 4 of the Cashmere Stream replanting. This has been a long-term project for the Zone Committees, and the changes, if you get a chance to go down to the Cashmere Stream and have a look, it's really, you can see it's each year how you can see the different growth for each year, and it's really great. The Cashmere Stream and Port Hills Working Group has a focus on erosion and sediment control and has the following recommendations. So we have 2 recommendations here. That Christchurch West Melton Zone Committee, Christchurch City Council, Environment Canterbury work with central government funding agencies to make resources available to work with landowners and to provide support and incentives for management of sediment at source. So this is a big problem in the Apawaho and Cashmere Stream, and it's been mentioned before. And there are a number of examples and possible opportunities that are present in your minutes. Second recommendation is that Christchurch City Council and ECAN spatially identify high-risk areas to focus priority actions for management of sediment at source. I lied, there were 3. That Christchurch City Council and ECAN set up a joint team of capable staff to specialise in erosion and sediment control to ensure effective and consistent processes across both councils. This would be established on a long-term basis. This quarter, the Zone Committee has recommended 7 projects for funding from the Immediate Steps programme. In your minutes, the 4 of these projects that are also receiving City Council funding are the Tunnel Road Reserve, Hums Drain Restoration, Lower Styx River, and the Otakaikino Wetland Beggars Tick Control. Finally, I attended a community meeting for the Water and Wildlife Habitat Trust, who were looking to develop a collaborative partnership between the owners and various agencies to protect the unique biodiversity at Otakaikino. The immediate steps funding, the Zone Committee has decided this year, rather than like Banks Peninsula, rather than have a scattergun approach, we're concentrating on the Otakaikino for the immediate steps funding. So that fits in quite well with the community meeting and the proposal from the Water and Wildlife Habitat Trust. So, and that's about it.
Thank you, Kevin. So is that meeting the one that Arthur
Yeah,
Adcock with the
that's
side
it, yeah.
attended that as well? So
Yeah.
has anything happened since that meeting? There was good attendance.
No, not really.
They haven't reconvened or,
No,
yeah.
no. It's it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, got to keep these things moving. Perhaps we need to
We do.
look at that. So is he working with you on that, the West Martin Zone Committee?
Not really. No, he's mainly working with the landowners.
Right.
We do have some immediate steps funding went into that area to fence off some of the pasture where there's some rare baby orchids in the pasture.
Right. Well, it's, you know, like the feeling I had was the landowners were really keen to get together and make some positive changes in that area, so
Yeah,
we'll keep an eye on it.
yeah, I think this is really good because the landowners in the past have been less than keen coming forward,
Yeah.
so it's good.
So there's some good recommendations, if we just note the recommendations in there, which we have. But the one I'm interested in too is that you're suggesting that we set up a joint team of capable staff to specialise in erosion and sediment. It's a shame Tim's not here because he would very definitely support that. So I'm wondering how we can take that forward. Or yeah. So if you make a note of that and we'll just discuss that offline. Thanks, Yanni. All right, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate you coming in and good work. So Yanni's moved.
Just to be clear, on page 28, there's 3 recommendations from the Zone Committee.
They are recommendations
They're
for the committee, not for you. You receive this report, we can actually bring you back information on that. There is a lot of work being done, and particularly in that space at this point in time. So you will receive them, and basically we can then report back on progress and how those are made. They're not recommendations for you as a committee to pick up any.
So in the resolution, perhaps, David, if we note the work of each Water Management Zone Committee, and note also, number 3, note the recommendations of the Zone Committee.
We seem to have this debate every
Well,
time
there's
the
some
Zone...
from the Zone Committee and some too from the Cashmere stream. Yeah.
So we seem to have this debate every time the Zone Committees come, because we don't get recommendations from the Zone Committees, which is what we've asked for, is can we have recommendations to change the staff or address the stuff that they're raising?
They are not instructions to council. They can't instruct us, but they can recommend, they can advise us, and that's all we're
Right, so maybe
noting.
do we just need to ask, do they advise that we consider these recommendations? And if so, what's the process to do that?
The recommendations, they are recommendations. You would have to get staff advice on those so that you can actually then, so you could actually ask for, note there and ask for staff advice on.
Yeah, let's do that, because
Those reports,
noting
if
that a lot of the stuff we're already doing, so...
Could be, but we've had infringement notices from ECAN around the sediment controls around Cashmere Valley. So, you know, it is an issue that's been raised repeatedly by the Zone Committee to us over the last 3 years. And I think at some point we do need to consider. I think the other question I had through the chair is, are we able to share what we're proposing in the draft LTP before we sign off on the draft, so that we can ensure that the Zone Committees are aware of what the measures that we're putting in place are and what ones we're not around sediment control? That was in the report. There's quite a big discussion about a number of things in the LTP.
So it's up to us to bring this information through to our LTP in our discussions if we choose to. Yeah.
Is there any opportunity to discuss it with them prior to us agreeing to the draft, so that we're aware of what things they would support or be concerned with?
To discuss it with the Zone Committee?
Yeah.
At the moment, you've got a consultation at a high level going out to all of the community.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop you having a conversation on any of those items individually. However, you've got to be really careful if you actually go out and start discussing potentially what you're thinking of putting in your draft before you put it, because there will be a formal opportunity to do that. But that's one of the reasons we have members on those zone committees to transfer some of that information over, so that there is the opportunity for that then to feed back up at your table, so that you can look at those opportunities.
So receiving these recommendations is very helpful. Sarah?
I think, I'm going to say this, I think Yanni's right though. So the zone committees are committees of council, and they're joint, but it does mean, and the councillors who've been in the LTP workshops can't take the confidential workshop stuff to the zone committees. But if we're seeing this as a valuable space, then it may be that a conversation with the zone committees over some stuff is appropriate. And yeah.
Just submissions to the draft.
Hang on a second,
raising
in the
concern
past,
where
the
we
zone
might-
committees haven't submitted because they're committees of council, and so it hasn't been in their mandate to submit to the annual long-term plans, or for whatever reason they haven't, because they've been told they hadn't had the mandate. Yeah, but if we're trying to get feedback from, we need to work out a process for them to be able to formally feed in, whichever process that is.
Then you could consider this as a really good process. They've had their meetings, they've had some recommendations. There's recommendations from their working groups to the committee, recommendations from their committee to this committee. It's up to us to pick this information up and feed it ourselves into our LTP. It's my view.
As long as there's a process for that to be done.
Andrew, and then Melanie.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've been very concerned about for a long time. Megan Pearce did some work around how recommendations from the zone committees to us and to ECAN are dealt with, because in the past they weren't dealt with in any way other than been simply forwarded to staff who would then respond to them in whatever way. So in the way that any other committee of council would work, they would bring their recommendations to council for consideration by council and further action. So we've dealt with this in the past by passing resolutions in relation to the reports that the committees are bringing here. And I think we did that the last time, or one of the last times, from the Banks Peninsula Committee, around the way that we were dealing with the sedimentation roadside cutting trials. So it is possible for us to respond to these zone committee reports by passing recommendations, but taking Dave's point, often that would be to request further information from staff around something that's come up in these reports, rather than making a substantive decision on it. But at least that allows matters that the committees are raising to be progressed. In terms of the committee's ability to input meaningfully into annual plan and long-term plan processes, that is very limited because of the nature of the confidential development workshops that we're having. A lot of those things are conversations in train that councillors can't report back to the zone committees in a meaningful way, and the zone committees are not allowed or able to submit as submitters on the annual plan or long-term plan, because technically they're committees of council. So this is something that still needs to be resolved, and we probably need a way of engaging with the zone committees early in the process, in the similar way to the way that we engage with community boards earlier in the process, to pick up their priorities. In the same way that the community boards have their community board plan, the zone committees have their priority actions and strategic priorities. It may be that in future processes we need to build that in as an early stage in the process, so that they're dealt with respectfully as committees of council.
So we could actually adopt the similar sort of community board model with the zone committees.
We could, and I don't know whether, Diane, you want to make a comment, but you've just reviewed the kind of committee constitutions and made some changes to them. It was at the last meeting, was it the meeting before?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. Yeah, so as Miriam mentioned, there is a zone committee review process, and as the Deputy Mayor mentioned, the current terms of reference specifically make it clear that zone committees cannot
Instruct.
make submissions on LTPs or resource consents, I believe, as well. I don't recall that that will have changed in the proposed revised terms
No,
of
it didn't.
reference. But that being said, in addition to the quarterly updates that the zone committees give you, where it's either the facilitator or the chair or one of the other members of each of the zone committees, you are getting minutes from zone committee meetings, and where there are recommendations that the zone committees have, those are in the minutes, and those are presented to this committee here, the Three Waters Committee.
Okay. Well, look, I'm happy just to receive to put the resolution as it is today, because as I said, a lot of this work we're already doing. I think it's the zone committees reinforcing the work that council's doing. There are two things that I did pull out of this, which was one of them was creating, sharing data and creating an online database that we can share, and the other one was ensuring that the council's providing enough resourcing. I think they meant staff resourcing for the committee. So, but if we leave it as this, we can pick this up. We request staff. Response might be better than advice. Yeah. So let's do that. Emma, have you got a comment?
Yeah, so
Oh,
we
sorry,
do
Melanie,
have
I'll come
a
to you.
principal advisor to each zone committee, and they are really actively involved. And certainly from the natural environment team and from my team, we are working closely across with ECAN and the zone committees on things like the cut slope erosion trial. Marion, Schoenfield and myself went and briefed the Banks Peninsula Zone Committee on our climate change strategy. So there's good engagement, but you know, there's always more that can be done.
Mm-hmm. Mel?
I was just wondering if we could, I was going to say about request staff advice to be considered during our LTP discussions, or whatever it is you want to call it, because it's quite useful to have specific things to think about when we're looking at our LTP in this process that we're in.
Okay, how about in request staff response?
So then we know what is being done, what isn't being done exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so we actually spend time looking at it.
So we could there was advice from memory, advice provided from each of the zone committees into our LTP. So, I mean, we could just pull that together and
BEC.
present that and provide some staff commentary on that.
With regard to our LTP provisions, where appropriate, if and where appropriate. Does that look okay? Yeah, and then full stop after LTP. Thank you, Sarah, that's good. Okay. Thank you. That's a really interesting discussion. Do we have a mover for that recommendation? Yanni, seconded Melanie. Any discussion? Yanni.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we just acknowledge the work of the zone committees during the year and just say thank you to all the work that they've done. It's quite cool to see in those reports a number of things that they're working on. And I was a bit concerned that the Ote Kikino was getting the focus, but I get it. We've got good water quality. It's really important to keep that.
Yeah.
And I look forward to next year where hopefully we can get a focus on some of the areas that have really bad water quality and look at what we can do to improve it, which I think we've got another item on the agenda. But really just to acknowledge all the work that the zone committees have done out the year, and just to say thank you, really. Thanks.
Thanks, Yanni, and I'd like to reiterate that as well. It's a huge amount of time and energy. I think one of the big changes with the format was one month would be a zone committee meeting, the next month is a workshop, but there's also other meetings in between, and I think the focus is really, really broadened out considerably on the community partnership and collaboration and empowering community groups who are doing incredible work. So I think it's just really becoming bigger and better every year, the zone committee work, from what I can see. And I think it's a really valuable thing that you're all doing. So on that note, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, and compliments of the season. That brings us to item 8, is the Biodiversity Fund applications. It's pretty self-explanatory. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nicholas, is it Nicholas?
Yes.
Hi. Right, do you want to just give us a brief overview or take it as read?
Well, there's 4 projects
Yep.
that have applied for biodiversity grant funding. 3 of them on Banks Peninsula, 1 in the Harewood ward, 3 for mostly forest, but some other interesting rocky outcrop ecosystems as well, and 1 for wetland restoration. All projects clearly meet the criteria for funding, significant ecological values involved, and what's the money is to protect and enhance them, and also contributes to protection and perpetuity. I'd point out that 2 of them are in collaboration with the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, and 1 in collaboration with QE2. And the other one is with Isaac's Wildlife Trust.
That's great. So we have maximum 40,000 that we can contribute, and that's fund matched.
That's right, yeah.
And see, noting we have over the years put in 655,871 since 2017, and some of that was for pest control as well. So it just shows us that we are working side by side with Environment Canterbury and the zone committees as well. Are there any questions on Yanni?
Just wondering in terms of how people know that this fund exists, and whether there's been any consideration of doing anything along the Pauaho-Heathcote River.
The information is on the council's webpage. In terms of the Heathcote, the funding is for private land, and so I'm not aware of there being any funds assigned to the Pauaho-Heathcote.
Yeah, this is different, and it's
So,
sites of ecological significance.
Take
as
the
well.
Kenaway farm site where we had the fire, which we still haven't seen the repair. And I mean, I don't know what's needed, but some of that was on private land. Would that be eligible?
If the owner applied and
Right.
the site had significant ecological values, yes, it would have been eligible.
Right, okay. So they just fill out an application form online?
Is that correct? Just go online onto the Christchurch
Yes,
City Council
and they can
website?
ring up, of course, and we'll provide them guidance and assist them with an application if they want that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
Good
that
to
might be
know.
quite good. I don't know if you know the area I'm talking about, but it's just where you've got that huge new subdivision that doesn't, it goes quite close to the river. So I presume that would be included.
I know the area, and I also know the river, which is an ecological site. It's listed in the plan as a significant site.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, Yanni. Phil?
Thanks, guys. That Isaac's one, is that on their land? Does their land go right up that?
Yeah, they big chunk of farmland there.
Yes, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Any more questions? Mike?
The last one up on Valley, why is that not why are we not matching the landowner?
I think
the Billabon's Valley one?
Yeah.
the landowner's already paid to fence the site, and they also have quite an extensive trapping program. And so the council's contribution is to contribute to the formal registration of the covenant boundaries, which is an administration cost, but also to pay for an ecological assessment, because one of the requirements of getting funding is that the site is then, in theory, entered into the district plan, recognised in the district plan as a significant site. So the funding is just contributing to that. The site itself is a marvellous forest remnant. It's got extremely high values.
But that's all they requested, isn't it?
That's all they're requesting, yes.
Right.
Yeah, they'll be aware of what they are entitled to. I mean, it doesn't stop them potentially putting an application in the future. The fund isn't limited to just one application per property or per site. As long as it's justified and meets the criteria, they can apply for future funding. But for the most part, they seem to have most things under control there. There's been a lot of effort they've put in on their own.
Right. No more questions? Andrew's happy to move. Mike, second. Any discussion? Andrew?
It's great to have these 4 projects in front of us today. I think this really shows the value of this fund, in particular the way that we can see benefits from the fund of leveraging match funding from other sources for these type of projects as well. In terms of our strategic directions, we're getting positive ecological and biodiversity benefits, partnership, collaboration, and broadly assisting with addressing climate change issues as well. So aligned with our strategic directions and really seeing the benefit through these 4 projects, which are quite different in terms of the way this fund is helping us achieve the outcomes that we're seeking.
Well said. Totally support that. All right, on that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, rocking on to item 9. The Pawaho Heathcote and Huratini Horswell Stormwater Management Plans. So we are... Who have we got coming for this?
We should have Paul Dixon.
Might be a bit ahead of time, are we? I know Tom couldn't come till 3, could he? Kevin, you're in the hot seat. Thank you. So we're receiving this, and also this has been to both community boards prior to coming here, is that correct? Pretty sure?
Yes, and my apologies, I'm not really prepared for this. There's been a bit of a mix-up in Paul's calendar, I think.
Yeah.
But I do know the subject matter reasonably well, as does Helen. So...
well, it's a huge piece of work, and really appreciate the work that's gone into it. So with the... can you just tell me, with the land drainage recovery program's been disestablished now, so what do we call it now? Is it just within the internal... Oh, thanks, Helen. Just call it the Flood Management Program in the Internal Works and Council.
So the Land Drainage Recovery Program was a specific program of works in response to the earthquakes and the enormous amount of work that was needed across the city on both the stormwater system but also across our flood protection infrastructure. And as you know, the biggest projects were those that were completed in the Flockton area and then the ones that are underway in the Heathcote area. Where we've got to in terms of now being almost 10 years post-earthquakes is that most of that recovery work has been completed.
Yeah.
So all of the projects of the Land Drainage Recovery Program have now been put back into business as usual within our stormwater management and floodplain management portfolios. So the flood protection activity and the stormwater activity cover off all of those projects.
Yeah, that's great.
So the stormwater management plans, of course, are closely related, but they are a statutory requirement of the comprehensive stormwater network discharge consent.
Right. So I think looking at the conclusion in this, this actually feeds into a lot of the recommendations that we just had from the Zone Committee, that, you know, raising awareness and educating citizens on how to stop contaminants at source, removing contaminants from stormwater and waste streams before they enter natural water, restore waterway corridors to a natural state, restore and plant riparian margins, improve in-stream habitat by sediment removal, riparian tree planting for temperature control, bank stability and shelter, and improve biodiversity to improve food sources for in-stream life. I mean, they're really good, strong ecological goals, and I think that actually is a very good document to help the community groups to get along on board and actually help deliver these as well, because we're not going to do it just by ourselves. So I'm really impressed with this. Has anyone got any questions for staff? Melanie, and then Yanni.
There's a couple of sections that don't actually look finished, like it says this section is still to be completed for flood hazards and...
Yes. Yeah, so that section is subject to some further modelling work, hydraulic modelling work, and that work needs to be completed before the document's complete, really, and that links back to conditions within the consent that Helen's referred to.
So how far away is that flood modelling work? Do you know?
For the Huratini, it's close. For the Opawaho, it's further away, and that's the subject of some discussion between us and ECAN at the moment as to potential timeline impacts on the delivery of that SMP.
Right.
It's quite a critical element, that flood management component of the consent. It was, you may recall, the subject of part of the appeal on that consent, original consent decision that our experts between ECAN and the city went into some considerable discussion on over several months, and so we're carefully threading our way through that to make sure that we do meet those requirements.
So is this coming back to this committee before it goes out for consultation?
Don't believe so.
The intention wasn't, we would fill in that, we wouldn't put it out to consultation until we filled in that flood, but it's a technical flood mapping, modelling basically, that needs to be done to fill in that gap.
But we don't have a timeline on that, so we don't know when it's going out for consultation then, is that right?
Because we're not recommending it go out for consultation either in the recommendations, it's just we're receiving there's this information in these reports, but don't quite get the process.
So the process for these documents are that the final approval lies with Environment Canterbury, not with this council. So what we're doing is recommending that the committee receive these so that you understand what's in them in terms of the information, and that we go out for consultation with the community. Then we'll make any changes, bring them back to this committee so that you understand what they are and can be involved in responding to what we hear through that consultation process, and then they'll be lodged with Environment Canterbury for approval as part of the consent.
So today we are recommending they go out for consultation then, really, aren't we?
In effect, you are, yes.
Without having seen the
what we
whole
would
thing.
like to do is continue with the consultation. The flood modelling is, as noted, is a technical requirement.
So just to be clear, they can't go out for consultation until the flood modelling is complete?
That's correct, although we continue to engage with the community, because we're engaging with the community all the time on the works that are already underway in the catchment. So we are implementing this work as we are finalising the plans for it, because we're not we're not going to stop any of the work that we're doing in these two catchments.
So is there a timeline that this has to be received by Environment Canterbury?
Yes, there is, and we're not going to meet that, which is why we're now in negotiations with them around the timelines that are embedded in the consent and the timelines that we need to complete the modelling that's also required by the consent.
Yeah.
So we don't yet have that completely confirmed.
Right.
Part of that delay was related to COVID, delay of some of that modelling work.
So can we be kept informed about the timeline and what's happening about that, Helen?
Yes.
Along the way?
Yeah, we'll keep this as a section in our bi-monthly report to you.
Thank you, that'd be good.
On the stormwater consent, so we've got a dedicated section to that now.
Great. Okay, that's comforting. Jimmy, do you have a question?
But these two documents on the from the page, you know, the date you particularly specify this in June 2021. Whether it's after consultation final version. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. But regarding to paragraph 1.4, particularly engage with all those stakeholders, key stakeholders, is council initiate consultation with them, or ECAN take a lead to, to consultation with them?
No, the consultation is led by us, because it's a requirement of our resource consent.
Okay.
And then the plan is finally approved by Environment Canterbury.
Yes.
as part of the condition of the resource consent. So it's a staff process,
Yes.
not a councillor process at Environment Canterbury.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anne, and then Yanni?
Yeah. I'm just wondering in terms of, thank you for all this work and for the amazing stuff that's happening out in this area. I mean, the wetlands are so appreciated by people. I don't really think they understand why they're there, and I think that's a challenge actually, but they certainly appreciate them. But I'm just wondering, when you go out for consultation with this, what would you hope to get back from the community?
I guess, yeah, we don't have any particular hopes. We're basically just taking an open book approach, laying out the document as it can be seen, some of the rationale behind. You'll appreciate from what you've seen. There is it's quite a document. Each of those documents. There's a significant amount of work behind each of them. They've been in development now, particularly the Heathcote one, for probably 6 years. It was sort of revised significantly as the comprehensive consent requirements required as that process unfolded. So, I think that we've endeavoured to keep the various stakeholders and in the community space engaged, particularly over the last 12 months or so, with community boards, zone committees, etc. So it's really, as I say, we don't have particular hopes, but we do see that there is a lot of thought being given, and we haven't had many people objecting to what we're putting forward to date anyway.
Okay, so in lots of ways it's really informing the community in terms of what's happening out there.
Yes.
One of the comments through the stormwater, the comprehensive stormwater consent, is a number of parties specifically asked for them to buy into this process. So I'm hoping we may get almost a level of a peer review of these documents by some of them. Admittedly, they'll have a conservation lens on, or they'll have a zone committee lens on, or they'll have. But I am hoping that they actually get quite a lot of professional attention, and some of that will come back and make it a better document. But they were very adamant that they wanted to be quite involved in these documents. So,
That's
yeah,
good.
might be exciting, might not be either.
Yanni, did you have a question?
Several questions. I mean, there's a lot of detail in here. I think the key thing is really to understand the financial implications. Is there a clear table that kind of explains what our financial commitments are to doing what's in here?
The significant capital works that are described within the SMPs are largely already within the current LTP, and other components are within the proposed draft LTP.
Is that OPEX as well as CAPEX, or just CAPEX?
And OPEX within the current LTP, yes.
Right.
Within the proposed, I'm not too sure, because to be quite honest, I'm not 100% certain of where the proposed draft OPEX components of the LTP.
And I guess that's what worries me about the timing, is like what comes first. Like, we're going to go out and consult on what we've got in the current LTP, but we've got a proposed LTP which could be quite different. And I just wonder how we kind of align that timing.
Yeah.
Do we have, what's the statutory time frame to consult the community on this?
Well,
there's a 2-month period prior to approval by Environment Canterbury.
But are we do we have to go out ahead of the draft LTP being adopted, or can we wait for that time?
I probably need to raise, there's another component which relates to what the member is referring to in terms of engagement with the community and the commitment of funding, if you like, to meet the SMP guidance. Within the conditions of the stormwater consent, we inserted a condition which requires the provision of what's referred to as an implementation plan. Now that's a citywide plan that draws guidance from SMPs, and I forget the exact wording of the condition, but it's something along the lines that the implementation plan will be prepared in coordination with the preparation of an LTP. Right, so the general process, without sort of referring to the sequencing of things happening too much, is that as SMPs are developed, and you'll appreciate that SMPs will be both generated and then revised on an ongoing basis through the term of the consent. In round figures, about every year we'll either be preparing a new SMP or reviewing and revising one, and then every 3 years, of course, normally we will have a new LTP, and at that time we will produce a new implementation plan that will take the SMPs as they stand at that time, what they are proposing, which isn't what they're proposing isn't mandated by council. That's, as Helen has said, a statutory requirement. What's in there is required by the consent. That implementation plan will align what's in those SMPs to what council ultimately decides is the way forward for council through the LTP.
With staff guidance on what the priorities are.
With
staff
input to that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just kind of mindful of like our budget pressures and all the conversations we're having, which again, we're in a kind of awkward situation that, what can we say? But I just wondered, in terms of if we publicly consulted on this at the same time as we were doing the draft LTP, then people can clearly see what's on budget to meet what's in the catchment plan. But if we go ahead of that process, then it feels like it's kind of not quite in sequence.
Yeah, and it's partly that I fully see what you're referring to there. I think with the next LTP, it will be a lot clearer, because at that point we will have been through the preparation of an implementation plan. This time around we haven't. Largely because of the timing of when the consent decision was handed down about a year ago, and where the SMPs that we're referring to here and other ones are currently at.
So just a really simple thing, like where it says, for example, we're going to audit 15 high-risk industrial sites a year, that will happen. Like that won't be, we don't have enough enforcement or monitoring staff and therefore we're not going to deliver that. What's in here has to happen because it's part of the consent.
That's correct.
Once this is adopted by ECAN.
That's correct, and we do have operational funding for that work.
Right. Okay.
I think one of the useful analogies that might help in terms of how these fit is they're a little like as our water safety plans drive the priorities in our asset management plans and our activity plans, but they're a statutory document and approved by someone else. These are much the same in the stormwater space. So these will inform our asset management plans and our activity plans and our priorities in those documents.
Okay, good. And just the other final question was, do we have a communication and engagement plan or consultation plan? Like I don't quite understand what the timing is around. Are we having any community meetings? We've got 2 months, I think you said, to engage with people. What's the time frame that we're doing that? Are we printing, I know it's very technical, but are we going to make hard copies available to people in libraries or in service centres, or how are we communicating?
Yeah, we do have a communications and engagement plan that's been in development since, I'm not sure exactly when, it was sometime during lockdown we initiated that with our communications staff, and that's communications advisor has been to the community board meetings, zone committee meetings, etc., and is advising on the formal engagement process.
How can we see that at a governance level? We just ask for it.
Would you like a copy of the
engagement? I mean, normally when we approve things to go up for consultation, and this is slightly unusual and unique.
This is a little bit different, yeah.
But we normally would be told, it's going to be opening on this date, it's going to go this time, here's the sessions,
This
that
is,
we're going to
this
host.
is different, this is provided for information.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different to, you know, like a statutory, or one of the policy and planning documents that Brendan would usually bring to you.
Well,
So this is an implementation plan and a statutory requirement of a condition of consent.
Yeah.
However, it's a very important one.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of public
and
interest.
we're keen that councillors understand what's in it, what the implications of it are. But yes, we do have a communications and engagement plan, and yes, we can share that with you if you would
Thanks,
like.
Helen. And we don't know when it's going out though, do we?
Well, we're still negotiating the timelines with Environment Canterbury.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mike.
If we don't know when it's going out, how's that actually affecting all our, like we seem to have so many different consultations happening all at the same time over a short period of time, a long period of time. It's like,
Well, this one's not going to be
This
for a while.
this one will be a bit more targeted.
Katie, welcome.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, a little undercooked, was not here for this presentation. But I can provide a memo up with the consultation and engagement tactics for this, rather than the whole plan, which I think you might find a bit operational. But we'll give an overview of start times, key tactics, what we're proposing, to give you a degree of comfort if that's appropriate.
Yeah, and we can feed back to that.
But it's not going to kick in at the same time as the LTP, which is what Mike's concerned about.
no, well,
We don't know.
it's not just the LTP though. I think we have
Climate
so many
change,
different
coastal
projects and
hazards.
strategies, etc., that are happening. We need to actually work out what we can actually, what we do have the capacity to actually consult with.
Or what the community has the capacity
to be
consulted on.
Yeah, because I think we're just doing too much.
Don't forget, we're waiting for the flood modelling work to come back in, which, as Kevin said, could be considerable time away.
And
Fair
we are
enough.
talking with very discrete geographic areas, and, you know, specific environmental groups, so it's not a sort of like a city-wide conversation to the same extent.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the timetable of some of this got set as part of the comprehensive stormwater consent. So, and again, I might not have the dates, but I think one of them had to be within 18 months of the start of the consent, and then another one in 2 years after the start. One of the things, and maybe going back to Councillor Johansson's question, if you have a look, for example, on 134, some of the timing we've got in there will be after the 2021 LTP. So that will give you the opportunity, depending, to enable us to manipulate or you know, look at the funding side and the implications of some of that. We haven't actually got set dates in there, but we may get something from the community that says, we think that's really, really important, and we could feed that back into the LTP and we could decide whether we can afford it or not. So there's some things that we need to do because we've got an external driver, which is our consent, and basically we are trying to coordinate, so we do need to bring it back to you with the right advice so that we can give you some advice on funding.
Just getting the funding stuff sorted would be really good, like things like district plan changes. I mean, if you read back through the flooding management plan for the Heathcote, it's really clear that we haven't done a lot of stuff that we said we'd do. Like, we haven't restricted development, we've actually increased and enabled development to happen in a large part of that area. So unless we have a specific budget tagged to the actions, I'm concerned that it won't happen. Well, we rezoned the whole Kinaway Farms to industrial. And like, I mean, you don't get a better opportunity than that to look at a floodplain.
So there are additional setbacks, and the flood management areas were extended and the high hazard flood management areas were introduced in the last round of the district plan.
Yeah,
and
but
we
this
are
goes
already
back to 1998.
Yeah, but we're updating our modelling in the Heathcote catchment to reflect all of that new infrastructure, and we'll update the district plan flood modelling maps again. So that's ongoing, and that work will keep going.
But we also have residential medium density as well in the area as well.
Yes, but the district plan provides mapping of the flood management areas and floor level requirements for any new development in those areas, so that they're above the 200-year floods.
Yeah, I get that.
I think it's
so that I mean,
using
managing the floodplain is about preventing development in the high hazard areas, but then having the most appropriate development in the other areas, so that you manage the risk from.
If you read the private plan change that went through, or the plan change that went through around that Kinaway farm, really interesting to see what the ecological and the environmental assessment was versus the decision that was made. And I mean, it's quite sad really, because what it shows is that things like sea level rise and coastal erosion just weren't really seen as important compared to the cost of or the economic benefit of the development. But I just think, I mean, there's a really good actions in here, the point that Dave's raised, but they don't have the budget attached. And I think we do need to be clear that if we want these things to happen, we need to attach a budget. That was really the key thing.
And there is some budget in there. I remember when we got the consent, we did put in some budget that I think, you know, look, going top of my head, 250, then 500, then 750 or something. There is some operational budgets in there to underlie principally our obligations, our bare obligations here. But through consultation, you may get a request from communities that they want more, and you're likely to get that.
Sarah?
Sorry, I just want to be clear. I just think it's really unfair to use an example of one thing that was poor that happened in the past to justify saying that nothing's happened at all, especially when it's really clear that actually lots has happened and lots of extra restrictions and things have gone in the meantime. And I just think just clear that up. So,
Anne?
Yeah, thank you. And Katie, in terms of this information, one of the cool things that's happening with the zone committees is that the community boards are becoming more active and more engaged. And I'm just wondering how we can engage community boards in this, in terms of being able to present the information that's here in quite a simple way so that they then can educate the community. So is that something that you, as part of the plan, to actually with this document to engage with community boards? It is, great. Yep. Okay.
Yep, and that engagement has happened, and one of Katie's team has been along too.
Tara has been along.
Yeah, and there is an abridged, well, it's a shorter version of the SMPs, which Paul has developed, that very well pulls out the key points
Right.
for a less arduous read.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
There's one point I wouldn't mind raising, if that's okay, and it's mentioned towards the front of the SMPs, that in the course of the development of the SMPs, we have identified that to address the issues around stormwater, surface water, waterways, the SMPs play a part, but they are not the total way forward to produce the outcomes that Council sees as necessary. And as Helen said, they are a statutory document. They fulfil specific needs under a consent to enable the council to discharge stormwater from its network. But there's a lot more water of a surface nature that we need to deal with or manage to achieve the outcomes in waterways, for instance, that we're looking for. So we see as a companion to the SMPs what we are referring to as a surface water strategic plan, which the integrated water strategy identified as one of the three pillars, if you like, of the water strategy, as being a key and important document, and that will reflect the more aspirational targets and objectives.
Yep.
Where the SMP falls a bit short.
Yep.
So the two sort of work together.
Yep.
And that strategic plan, surface water strategic plan, is due for first draft coming back to this council in November 2021.
Great. So much work going on. Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? All right. Well, look, I'm happy to move this, to receive this. And I have a seconder. Jimmy?
Yeah.
Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kevin. That was nicely explained. Item 10. Welcome, Tom, here to talk to us on receiving another great huge piece of work on the impacts of earthquake and sea level rise on shallow groundwater. Thanks, Tom. You're just going to give us a précis, perhaps? Or?
Just very, very briefly, if you
Yep.
welcome it. The report has been prepared as part of the multi-hazard assessment, multi-hazard study. It's a gap-filling report within that wider study, helping us understand shallow groundwater as it is today, the effects the earthquakes had on shallow groundwater and how shallow groundwater might change moving forward in time with sea level rise. We already understand that shallow groundwater presents a challenge across the city in many parts, near to the coast and further away. We understand from this new work that there has been earthquake impacts on land subsidence, obviously, but also on groundwater levels. Most of those have been very short-lived. The report also clearly outlines that groundwater level will change with sea level rise, and that we can anticipate parts of the city having shallower groundwater levels or groundwater closer to the surface than we might expect or experience today. And the report also identifies that when groundwater gets near to the surface, it can have impacts on the community and also on utilities and asset provision. The report and investigation itself is at a very high level. So it is a broad study across the city. It's not accurate to the property level. There are too many uncertainties with groundwater measurement, soil measurement and predictions to have a study at this level generate the information that might be required for property level assessment. And the intent is to use this information as part of ongoing investigations into changing flood risk and floodplains associated with multi-hazard study. The report itself is, we're planning on publishing on the website in the coming days. Thank you.
That's it. Huge bit of work again, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Tom on this one? Jimmy?
Only one question, because but regarding the citywide geographic area, in which area we are aware, this kind of the groundwater, shallow groundwater, where is the information here?
Well, groundwater, there are some hazard maps identified within the report that you might find about midway through. I can give you an exact page reference.
Not yet.
But in terms of spatially across the city, groundwater is being managed already through a large extent of open drains and channels that have been cut over decades, going back to the urbanisation and changing land use and development of the city. So groundwater levels are expected to be are very high in places like the Upper Styx River catchment, Lower Styx River catchment. There's areas in the Opawaho catchment where we observe very shallow groundwater, and also locations in more coastal suburbs. Yes. The study itself is doesn't traverse as far as Banks Peninsula areas, so we don't have information provided within that report on those areas.
Okay, thank you.
But this will just go on the website for information only. There's no effect on people's properties. There's no effect on the limb or anything like that.
No, we're not anticipating putting this on people's limbs. As groundwater isn't considered a hazard per se. It might be a property of the land, but it's not a natural hazard, not considered to be a natural hazard. So it's the view of the team that it isn't necessary to put it on limbs. And also, as I reflected earlier, at a property level, groundwater is still highly uncertain, and this report is really just focused at general changes over time.
Yeah. Your properties are too specific. Great. All right. Thank you. Do I have a mover for this? Receive this report. Melanie, seconded by Jimmy. Any discussion? I'll put the motion in. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Tom. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Of the season. Okay, we move on to item 11, which is the Three Waters report. And welcome, Helen. You want to run through your key points with us?
Yeah, so this is our regular bi-monthly report on the Three Waters operations. Key points to note, we're involved with the central government reform program for Three Waters, both in terms of receiving the funding, so the 40 million stimulus funding, we have 20 million of that in the bank, and we are progressing the projects that are being funded there, so about 30 million of capital projects and about 10 million of operational projects are underway, and those are all on track. We're also providing very detailed information on our water services to the Department of Internal Affairs as part of their nationwide request for information on the infrastructure and the operation of those services for the community. That work is being done with good support from Internal Affairs and also support from the Water Industry Commission in Scotland. So they're using the people in Scotland to essentially audit and assist us with that data. We're also making progress on the Three Waters Bylaw review, and as mentioned previously, we are proposing to split that into two separate bylaws going forwards, one for water supply and wastewater and the other for stormwater. A part of the driver for that is that comprehensive stormwater network discharge consent and supporting the consent conditions through a dedicated bylaw. In terms of the drinking water compliance, we've got an overview of the monitoring and progress on the revision of the water safety plans, and I'm delighted to say that since confirming this report for the committee, we have had the water safety plan for Akaroa and Takamatua approved. So that was the second water safety plan approved under the new framework in the country, so we're very pleased to have that through. And of course that provides a lot of the generic material and the risk framework template that will be used in the other water safety plans for our other community suppliers. So that's a big step forward in terms of getting those other water safety plans approved. The water conservation campaign has started, and again, since this report went out, and just yesterday, of course, we introduced water restrictions across on Banks Peninsula, and that's because we've had a long period of warm and dry weather, and the streams up behind Akaroa and Takamatua are running very low, and we're approaching our consented takes. One of the things that we have done just in the last few months is upgrade the bore, the Aylmer's bore for Akaroa, and we are getting a much better yield from that bore, so that's assisting us in maintaining continuity of supply and through to Akaroa. And then we have the overview of the capital projects underway across the district, and I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you. With the bylaw reviews, the two of them now, do they have to go out for consultation?
Yes, they will.
And so
they'll go to a hearings panel, but that'll be next year.
Yeah, but so you're saying that they're coming here in early March,
Yes.
April? They'll go out after that.
That's
so
correct, yep.
That's good news, isn't it, Mike? Another one. Are there any other questions for Helen on this? Mike, then Yanni.
Thank you. I'm just going to scroll back to it. The Littleton Rail Tunnel pipeline, which has costs ranging from 8 million to 300 million. How the discussions with Kiwi Rail, are they problematic or going well?
Are they going well? I don't really want to get into the details of that, but we can provide you...
No, if they're going well, that's better than what happens with other stuff, Kiwi Rail. And also, is that included on the long-term plan, that?
Yes.
I assume at the lower cost, at the 8 million.
It's closer to the 8 million than the 300, yes.
Thank you.
The 300 is a new tunnel, isn't it, basically?
The other thing, and I'm not too sure if you have the answer on you, Cashmere, the well development, which is expected to be completed this month, but it's obviously had some delays because it was meant to be November. How's that progressing?
No, I don't have that answer. I'll get back to you. Cashmere will.
Thank you.
If you could send that out to the whole committee, that'd be good, Helen. Thanks,
Certainly,
Mike.
thank you.
Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. Just had a lot of feedback that the organics plant's been really stinky the last few days.
Sorry, can we deal with that when we go to the resource recovery report?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think we might have time to touch on that.
Because then I'll bring Rowan to the table as well.
Great.
Sorry, I thought you were doing them
Helen, with the water safety plans, we seem to be looking at lead quite a lot, lead leaching. But let's say everything else we were compliant with and we still had lead leaching, that would not require us to chlorinate, would it? Because chlorination doesn't deal with lead.
That's correct. The chlorine residual is there where there's a risk of bacterial contamination, and it has no impact on the lead. So the work on lead is so where we have seen high levels of lead, and it tends to be where we've got a length of that old iron main with the lead joints in it that has a dead end, so we're not getting water flushing through it regularly. We have rerouted some of the other mains to provide those residents, so we've dealt with the problem through that. And in other places we'll be replacing those mains. But what we're doing is upping our sampling across the city where we know we have those old mains, so that we have a better idea of what the lead levels are in the water supply.
But the lead levels could prevent our water safety plan being signed off if everything else was compliant. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. So lead is identified as a risk. You don't have to eliminate all risks to have a water safety plan approved. What you have to demonstrate is you're managing those risks appropriately.
Okay, that's good, thank you. Any other questions for Helen? Oh, Leanne, thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm just concerned about the amount of time for the groundwater ageing process. Is there anything that we can do to help get a kind of a wriggle on in that regard?
So we have brought in additional resources to do the sampling at our end, and we have had an exchange of letters between our chief executive and the chief executive at GNS Science to try and get that work moving on. However, the bottleneck is with the technical expertise at GNS Science, and it just takes time to get the samples through, and we're not the only council, of course, that is attempting to get samples analysed and the results back.
Ours is more important than the other ones, though, because, and I don't say that with too much humour in my voice, but the reason I say that is that our ageing requirements were well known prior to the earthquakes happening. The earthquakes happened, we had a considerable amount of additional time allowed for, in fact, we weren't required to prove the ageing side of things. We lost our secure status based on the wellheads, not on this. And I'm kind of frustrated that they can't give us a bit more leeway, even if we got to a, what was the in-between secure arrangement that we had for a while?
We had provisionally secure status.
Couldn't we get provisional status just while the final works? I mean, the work is showing that it is meeting the requirements of that of the drinking water standard.
So what we've done in the sampling program is that we've prioritised it so that we get the best possible spread of samples across the city. So we've make sure that we get one sample from each of the aquifers that's being tapped at each of the pump stations before we go back and then do the other wells. So we're hopeful that before we've completed the full sampling program, we'll have sufficient information to inform the water safety plan and regain that secure status. However, we are in the hands of the experts in terms of providing that modelling back to us. But
is there nowhere else that we could? I mean, could we seek some additional support through Australia or something like that? I mean, are we just stuck with just the one source?
We have investigated overseas providers. However, the overseas providers would probably take longer because they don't have the background information and the context of the Christchurch aquifer system, which is also an essential component of the modelling.
All right. Okay, I've asked all my questions.
Thanks, Leanne. What do you mean?
Thank you, Chair. table 2, I'm still concerned. You particularly mentioned the 3 are major tasks undertaken, even you have progress 40%, 60%. But regarding overall the schedule, when will it be ready and resubmit to the drinking water assessor?
The Christchurch Water Safety Plan, that will be submitted, well, our last possible date is the 24th of December. So we're going to submit it this month. I'm reviewing the draft. When I go back to my desk, that's what I'll be going back to.
Okay, that's the whole city-wide, am I right? Whole city-wide, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, for Christchurch and
Yes.
for Littleton Harbour Basin
Yes,
settlements. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Melanie?
We need to reply to the customer.
Yeah, I'm off the page. The thing about Littleton, it says something about the 16th of December, the wastewater getting it on track. Did you talk about that already? I just was...
The non-compliance with the wastewater discharge to the harbour. Yes, so yes, we have done some work on that, and yes, that is back on track and back in compliance. And the discharge is beautiful.
Cool.
And just one more from me is about City Care and their missing continuous monitoring data. So are we on top of that yet?
Yes, so that's about, so that was about a change in staff, where a previous staff member was doing the monthly checks that were required, and then a new staff member came on board and was not doing those monthly checks. So there was a gap in terms of both the documentation and training that has now been filled, yes.
Okay. Ian?
A quick one, I may have missed this, but the water safety plan will be submitted at the end of this month.
Yes.
And did you say how long it would take for some feedback about that and where we're up to and how we're going?
No, I didn't. So this will be the second time we've submitted it. So we're resubmitting this plan, so it wasn't approved the first time around.
Yeah.
However, because we've had the Akaroa Takamatua one approved, we're very confident that we have the components nailed, and it's now about evaluating how we've identified and managed the risks that are present in the plan.
And any idea how long it will take those people whose hands it is in to kind of give us that feedback, get back to us?
It will be several weeks. It's a very comprehensive plan and quite a complex water supply network that we have here in Christchurch. So yeah, they will take time, and they're likely to come down to Christchurch and visit us and workshop some of the elements of that plan and undertake site visits before it's signed off. So it'll be a comprehensive process.
They've currently got Wainui, and I think they've had that for probably 4 weeks or 5 weeks now, and we haven't heard back on that. And Wainui is obviously a little bit smaller than Christchurch, so I'm not saying that necessarily size is all, but it's far more comprehensive, the Christchurch one, than Wainui. So.
Yep.
They're also undertaking a very thorough process. So there'll be a lead assessor, and then that work will be peer reviewed by another drinking water assessor, and that's to ensure national consistency in terms of the water safety plans and the standards that is required.
Thanks, Helen. And where are we at with Plan Change 7? I know that the hearings
So Plan Change 7, the hearings have been held,
in
and
November,
our staff and experts have given evidence, and so we need to wait for the decision on that.
So no timeline?
I haven't seen a timeline, but there may be one. I can check for you.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there's no more questions, I'll move Helen's report. I seconded Sarah. Any discussion? Apart from multitude of thank yous, Helen. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you.
Report. So we have got time to revisit the item that we held over from the last meeting, which was the resource report. Thanks, Andrew. And I believe we take it as read. I believe Yanni has a question.
I was just concerned that, just hearing from local residents, that the smell's been really, really bad again. And I know we were advised last week that there'd been an infringement notice served by ECAN. Has there been any further notices of non-compliance or infringement notices served by ECAN? And have we actually talked to the operator to find out what's causing the really bad odour the last few weeks?
Yeah, so
We have received a compliance monitoring report for the facility, and that was basically Environment Canterbury looking at each of the consent conditions and giving us kind of a status update on where we were sitting. So there's a couple of things out of that report that have been flagged that we now want to have a bit more dialogue with Environment Canterbury and make sure we can rectify with the contractor. In terms of the infringement notice issued, I think it was for the 17th of November, there was very little technical detail provided alongside that infringement notice. The operator has gone back to Environment Canterbury asking for that detail, and we've also approached Environment Canterbury asking for that detail, because without the technical rationale for the infringement, we can't make those changes. So we're just having that dialogue with the regulator about what the actual identified issue was, so that we can rectify it. And certainly we've had that negotiation with the operator, with Living Earth, since the council decision, and working through what operational changes they can make on site. But no additional infringement notices that I'm aware of at this stage.
I thought the infringement notice was early December, and there was another one, a notice of non-compliance in November. But
I think it was the infringement notice was.
It was received in December, but it was for a date in November.
Right.
Which I believe was the 17th.
And so do we have people were just getting really upset because I guess they had hoped the recipe would solve the odour problem, and it appears things are getting worse. But do we have any understanding of how bad the problem is getting versus how much it's improving? Like, are we seeing any improvement in the number of complaints or that's happening? Because people are just trying to understand. Yeah, like the recipe was going to improve.
Can we get an update on any complaints that are being received, please? Do we get those? We get those off
because I understand Environment Canterbury rather than the City Council.
But I understand we get weekly updates.
And are made available on their website.
Okay, they're on the website. Yeah, thank you.
So can we get a copy of that compliance report? Like, could that be circulated to us so we can actually see what's in it? And is it a public document?
Not 100% sure. I'll come back to you guys though either way.
It's just because, like, on our website, the information's kind of dried up compared to ECAN's. So we were putting up updates when ECAN did it, and maybe we don't need to, but our website didn't seem to have up-to-date information.
So I guess, we need to understand the roles of the two organisations. Like, it's Environment Canterbury's role to regulate, air discharges in the community. They are the regulatory authority. We are a potential source of odour, and so we're trying to provide the community with as much information as we can. But Environment Canterbury, as the regulatory body, will be the one source of the truth for that data. So for any non-compliances, that or otherwise.
So it is good to see there has been an update since I last checked. So we do have a November and a December update. And just the final question really is around the recipe. Like, is there any kind of detailed information that we can understand about how effective the recipe was or wasn't?
So I think the critical thing with the recipe is that we've now, through the council resolution last week, we've now got a direction to change that incoming product again, to reduce, I guess, that commercial material, which has been identified as one of the high risk materials, and it's been flagged by the community as being a concern to them. So by changing that recipe, we are moving, I guess, again in terms of what will be processed through the tunnels. So that will have an impact on what comes out, albeit it's a very small proportion of the incoming material that is being, I guess, diverted.
But I just think at a high level, people just kind of want to understand though, like, we thought the changes to the recipe would work, the composition's changed.
And hence the resolution that we made last week. So,
I get all that.
Away from the adaptation.
But I think just having some understanding of.
So there is some technical information around what they did in terms of changing the recipe and what the result was in terms of the temperature of the piles outside and the odour profile outside and the chemicals that make that up. However, I'm not sure that any of that is going to be helpful.
No,
in terms of understanding the number of complaints. and indeed explaining that is sometimes seen as making excuses, and then you get howls of but it didn't work.
Yeah,
so
I think at the end of the day, we're doing our best.
It's a difficult thing. We can provide more of that information, and we can show what changes were made. However, what we have all agreed is that the changes to the recipe have not been effective enough. They haven't made enough difference, and therefore we need to make the technology
we've been
changes.
over this last meeting. Other people got questions. Is it okay? We have made a decision to move forward.
Okay, so the key thing is the compliance report from ECAN. There's improvements that they're saying we can still make in terms of compliant with the consent, and we're talking to the operator.
That's correct. So we're not sitting back and saying, okay, the technology is going to solve it all.
Yeah.
We are continuing to work with the operator to improve the operation on site as much as we can in terms of those changes to the inputs to the composting process that were of particular concern to the community. So that's largely what people were talking about, the turkeys and the chickens and the fish meal.
Yeah.
Okay, so that material is coming out of the input stream, and we are continuing to work with both Living Earth and Environment Canterbury to understand what the particular issues are, if there are any further non-compliances, and we will address those, whether it's through changes to the recipe, changes to the misting on the site, changes to the site boundary.
Is there a key kind of, what's the kind of next key milestone where we can say to the community, we've done X, Y, Z, recipe didn't work, now we've done X, Y, Z, and we're aiming to look at an improvement?
I don't think there is another key milestone such as that. There is an iterative process of ongoing improvements as they're identified. However, the next big milestone will be the redevelopment of the plant.
Thanks, Helen.
So, I mean, there's one with taking out the commercial
feedstock. That's what I was trying to
We're just doing our best, Yanni. Phil?
Yeah, people are pretty pissed off.
How's your arm? I saw you ages ago.
No, I was resting.
I saw you ages ago. Sorry.
I was interested in this because I thought Yanni would bring this up. So I asked the officers of CE, and I got a response back. Why are we not taking the commercial waste out until the 23rd of December? Because we made a resolution last week, take it out. Surely it's just a phone call, stop accepting it. But now we're commenced contractual negotiations with Living Earth.
The resolution asked that we commence contract negotiations to remove that material, so that's what we've done.
Bring them up, say stop.
They've agreed to stop accepting that material from the 23rd, which is this time next week.
Why? It's like we're playing with the people down there. Sort of. No wonder they get pissed off with us, because we don't. If we've made a resolution, we just ring them and say, "Bang, do it." It's not my problem that that they've got nowhere to take it. They can take it to the red bins or Parkhouse Road or whatever, dump it straight in the blue truck, and it goes away. But I'm not getting at you. I'm just saying, why can we not act quicker?
I think
that's why there's no smell difference.
Our approach to the commercial waste issue, and there's a significant revenue stream for the operator in that material, is to have a negotiation rather than to really force their hand and get litigious, basically, because they are taking a loss by removing those waste streams, and so we're trying to negotiate a fair and reasonable agreement to remove those waste streams rather than direct them to cease everything right now as of today, and then them come back and ask for costs.
Are they looking for compensation for taking the food waste out?
No, so we've had an initial negotiation with Living Earth and Waste Management, the operator, about how we remove those materials, and they've agreed to stop accepting that pre-consumer food waste, so the meat scraps, the fish waste, by 23rd of December. That negotiation will continue, and we'll look at whether there are other material streams that also need to come out, including, as discussed, some of the other food and organic material from other territorial authorities during construction. So we've started that dialogue, but they weren't very receptive to the idea of not receiving any commercial material. That's about, I don't know their value actually, but that's a significant chunk of change for them in terms of income.
I think, Phil, we've got to understand that some of this might be commercially sensitive. Some of it is about negotiating a contract and some of it staff probably can't speak to publicly about it, and it's a sensitive area, and I think getting it out by the 23rd, I'm quite impressed actually, and I know people would have liked to seen it out. When did we make the decision? Was it last week or the week before? Yeah, so that's 3 weeks, it's not too bad. Immediately would have been good, but I think there's probably commercial sensitivity. Melanie, then Jimmy?
So that does mean that there won't be any change to the odour experienced until April, basically, doesn't it? For the 3 months?
Well, remember it's 2 weeks in the tunnels and then goes outside, so it'll start to change quite quickly. However, completing the old material that's out there will take a little longer. However, I don't think it's the oldest material that gives most of the odour. It'll be the fresher material that's actively composting that contributes most to the odour. Yeah. So I suspect the changes will come much faster than the complete turnover of the site.
Jimmy?
Regarding the time frame and also regarding the type of all those the waste collection, I just want to know, because you mentioned particularly in June of next year, you will be ready, is focus on yellow bin, am I right? Recycling the sites and associated the charge. Then feedback from the public, then in June, but you charge based on this new option from the July of 2021, or is waiting for another year, stage 2, you will do another one from the July of 2022, which year?
There's two critical things to it, and we've proposed to come back to council with a workshop on the charging mechanism, because we want that input around how we deliver those changes before we go out for consultation. Yes. So that's likely to happen at the end of January. But the critical thing is, under the current bylaw, we can't provide those larger refuse bins. Yes. So we're actually restricted by that bylaw. So we need to make the bylaw change, and then we can implement this service delivery, this change in services. So I don't know what has gone into the LTP discussion thus far, but we've certainly put it up as a discussion point to say we are looking to implement this change.
Okay. So until July of 2022, am I right? Started from 2022.
No, it could be enacted earlier than that, but it depends. We also need to get the bylaw changes through as well, so we can look at that. But some of the fees and charges we can change within the annual plan.
Right, that's a good question. Thanks, Jimmy. And I've just got one here on page 490. An encouraging drop in curbside recycling bin contamination through October indicates an improvement. Is that still a continuing trend? Because that's October, we've now had November.
It is a continuing trend.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. We've still got a way to go, but it's much better than it was. I believe we're about 20% of trucks at the moment.
Fantastic. That's really good news. So that the message is getting in. Because I think there's been a really good uptake on the pamphlets at the service centres, that people are picking them up to the stickers for the bins. So just people were wanting to be really clear about what they can put in, so they're figuring it out. So no more questions. I'm happy to move the report. Over seconder, James this time. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Oh, so I'm sorry, Yanni, did you want to discuss?
Well, I just wanted to reflect that, the community were really grateful for the decision that was made last week, but they're really struggling to comprehend how our plant, which we contract out to an operator, is just continuously producing a really foul odour in the community. And they're really getting incredibly stressed out, particularly going into a holiday season where a lot of people will want to have family and friends come and visit and celebrate the end of the year and Christmas. That the problem just seems to be continuously getting worse. I think it's really concerning that ECAN have finally only just served an infringement notice, and then to hear that we're challenging it. Like, if anyone lives in that area and put up with that smell, if anyone shouldn't be, we shouldn't be challenging it. Like, it seems crazy to me that anyone would try and argue that there's not a problem in that community and that we need more information and more evidence. There is a clear problem, and I wish it had improved. I thought the 3-month adaptive management plan would address some of the issues, because it was building up and getting worse and worse, despite all the focus that we've had on it since 2015. But yeah, I think getting transparency around the compliance report to the local community is really important. so that they can see what things are going to be done and get clear timeframes for when. It is concerning to hear that we're going to wait till the 23rd of December for that other stuff to come out, but I understand there's obviously contractual issues. But please don't be under any illusion of how bad this problem is and how it appears to be getting worse, and that this is a private company that's profiting off this. So, it's time, it really is time for it to stop. And it's time that we actually got greater transparency about what's happening there so the community can understand it. Because at the moment, if you just go onto the Facebook group, you'll see the mood and the tone of that community, and they are absolutely fed up, which is a real shame when we did something really positive last week to have to deal with repeated complaints. Someone must know what's going on there to be causing the problem, and someone must have the power to stop it.
Thank you, Yanni.
Yeah, because the particular, based on the STAR report, emphasize, the seawater infrastructure and the environment committee, actually has been adopted the council 2020, those the waste management and also the kind of the, the minimize the plan, So that's one, but key issue is implementation plan. So we follow those implementation plan. One aspect actually contributed to our the climate change. The other one is we see those the kind of vision. We particularly emphasize this is zero waste and the circular economy. But if we are not follow those the implementation plan to be a good model, also need to working together, with the central government, also as well as those the key stakeholders, we possibly still cannot make that happen. So this report just remind us, just go on, move on.
Thanks, Jimmy. Look, I hear what Yanni's saying. I do support Yanni in this, but part of our resolution was that staff continue to be engaging with the community, and if we can share any information that we have and make sure our website is current. And I think also part of the resolution was to encourage perhaps a reduction in the volume that they put through if we can negotiate that. So anything we can do to help, and I hear that you are trying to help, and I think it's really important because I do feel for those people too, Yanni, and I feel for you because you cop it. So I think we've made that decision that we're doing everything that we can. We will keep trying, working with the operator, and we'll keep trying our best. So thank you for the report, and it's been moved and seconded, it's been debated. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. And just while you're there, Helen, did you have anything to report about the leaks, the water leaks that you wanted to tell us?
So you asked for a memo a few weeks ago in terms of water service requests and the delay in responding to minor leaks, particularly at residential properties.
Yes.
So when we produced that memo, there was quite a backlog. There were, I'll just, hang on, I'll pull out my numbers. And we've been doing considerable work with our contractors to clear that backlog. So when we sent the memo through to you, we reported a backlog which was as of the 24th of November, where we had, 85 jobs that were between 2 and 4 weeks old, 46 jobs more than a week old, and 2 jobs sort of 4 to 7 days old, when we aim to complete all of those within 3. So I'm pleased to report that now that backlog is there are none in that 2 to 4 weeks. There are none in more than 1 week. We have 2 that are setting out between 4 and 7 days, and all of the remainders are within the 0 to 3 days.
So we've kind of caught up.
We've caught up, cleared the backlog, and we're getting daily reports from the contractor to ensure that we stay caught up.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Helen. That is good news. Thank you very much.
All right, cheers. And I did get an update through text on the Cashmere well, back in service on the 2nd of December, and final handover before Christmas. So yes, that well is back in service and completed.
Thank you. Wonderful,
Helen. Good
wonderful work.
Come down to point 2.
So I'll now call on Councillor Daniels to close the meeting.
Kia ora tātou, he karakia whakamutunga. Unuhia, 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 ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua, I te ara takata. Koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, hui e taiki e. Kia ora.